What if the engine that saved Volkswagen was never supposed to exist? In the late 1980s, Volkswagen wanted a six-cylinder halo engine. There was just one problem. Their platforms were transverse, their engine bays were tight, and a traditional V6 simply would not fit. An inline-six was too long. A proper V6 was too wide. They were boxed in. There was no conventional solution, so they built something that made no sense on paper. An engine that broke the rules of packaging, and it changed everything. If you love the hidden engineering stories behind real cars, subscribe to Das Auto Diaries right now, because today we're diving into one of the boldest mechanical gambles ever made. Let's start. At the end of the 1980s, Volkswagen had a prestige problem. The brand was solid, rational, efficient, but it lacked that one thing that turns respect into desire. BMW had its straight six. Mercedes had its refined inline engines. And inside Wolfsburg, a decision was made. Volkswagen wanted a six-cylinder halo engine, not for numbers, not for practicality. They wanted something that would change how people felt about the badge. There was just one brutal reality. Volkswagen's entire lineup was built on transverse platforms. The engine sat sideways, the bays were tight, everything was engineered with millimetric efficiency. That architecture had made them successful, and now it was suffocating them. A traditional V6 was too wide. It simply would not clear the strut towers. An inline six was too long. It would never fit across the front axle without redesigning the entire car. And redesigning the platform meant millions. New crash structures, new tooling, new production lines. Financially, it made no sense. Marketing demanded six cylinders. Management wanted a flagship engine. But when engineers opened the hood, they saw nothing but limits. There was no space left to grow. Volkswagen had engineered itself into a corner. They were boxed in by their own efficiency. And that is where the real story begins. When management saw limits, a small group of engineers saw possibility. They refused to accept that six cylinders would not fit. If space was the problem, then the definition of a V6 had to change. What if it did not have to be wide? What if it did not have to be long? What if it could be something else entirely? That question led to a concept that sounded almost absurd at first. The V-Rhine motor, literally the V inline engine. It was not a traditional V6. It was not a straight six. It was a radical hybrid of both philosophies. Instead of spreading the cylinders at 60 or 90 degrees, they narrowed the angle to just 15 degrees. 15 degrees between the banks, so tight that the cylinders almost stood in a single line. Slightly staggered, interlocked like mechanical fingers. That narrow angle allowed something extraordinary. One single cylinder head could cover all six cylinders. No separate heads, no wide layout, no massive footprint. Just one compact top end, sealing what was technically still a V engine. On paper, it looked wrong. Purists would say it broke the rules of symmetry and balance. Mechanics worried about cooling flow. Analysts questioned vibration. But in physical terms, it solved the unsolvable. It was almost as short as a four-cylinder. It was barely wider than a typical inline engine. It could sit transversely without demanding a completely new platform. They had compressed six cylinders into a space designed for four. It was an engineering compromise, yes, but it was also a breakthrough. A solution that looked insane on paper, yet brilliant inside an engine bay. And in that narrow 15-degree angle, Volkswagen quietly found its way out of the corner. Not everyone believed in it. In fact, many inside Volkswagen thought it was a mistake waiting to happen. A six-cylinder squeezed into a four-cylinder space sounded clever in theory, but dangerous in reality. The first concern was vibration. With such a narrow 15-degree angle, the engine did not behave like a conventional V6, and it certainly was not a perfectly balanced inline six. Engineers worried that refinement would suffer. Would it shake? Would it feel coarse? Would customers notice? Then came cooling. Six cylinders packed tightly together meant heat concentration. Coolant flow had to be redesigned carefully. Cooling complexity became a serious engineering headache. Too much heat in the wrong place, and the entire project would collapse under reliability issues. The firing order also raised eyebrows. This was not a textbook configuration. The firing sequence was unusual, almost unconventional, And that meant acoustic behavior and combustion smoothness had to be recalculated from scratch. Mechanics were skeptical. Technicians who had spent years working on traditional layouts looked at the blueprints and frowned. Some believed it was over-engineered and unnecessarily risky. Internally, whispers began. The nickname started circulating in corridors and behind closed doors. A few engineers privately called it Project Suicide. Not because it lacked brilliance, but because if it failed, it would fail publicly. A halo engine that vibrated, overheated, or broke down would not elevate Volkswagen. It would embarrass it. The risk was enormous. If the vr6 did not work, it would damage the brand's credibility for years. And that is what made the next step so bold. And then came the moment that could have ended everything. The engine that many had called a mistake was finally ready to face the public. Volkswagen did not launch it with fireworks or theatrical marketing campaigns. It simply placed it under the hood of a familiar shape and let the ignition do the talking. That shape was the Volkswagen Golf vr6. From the outside, it did not look revolutionary. Slightly wider stance, subtle badging, a hint of intent, but nothing that screamed of 6 cylinders, and that was part of the shock. No one expected a compact front-wheel drive hatchback to carry a 6-cylinder heart. Then it started. The idle alone was different. Not the metallic buzz of a 4-cylinder, not the silky sweep of a straight 6. Something thicker, something denser, a sound never heard before in a compact hatchback. When the throttle opened, the narrow angle architecture produced a tone that was unmistakable. Deep at low revs, urgent through the mid-range, metallic and urgent near redline. It did not scream. It surged. It felt muscular in a way hot hatches were not supposed to feel. Road tests of the time recorded 0 to 60 in under 7 seconds, a number that placed the Golf in territory previously reserved for larger coupes and executive performance sedans. This was a Golf that sounded like a BMW and moved like one too. And suddenly the perception shifted. Volkswagen was no longer just rational, it was daring. It had taken a packaging compromise and turned it into an emotional weapon. The vr6 did not feel like an experiment. It felt like a statement of intent. Then came the Volkswagen Corrado vr6, lower, sharper, more aggressive, proving the engine was not just about novelty, but about genuine performance depth. In the Corrado, the vr6 showed refinement and torque delivery that made it feel mature, almost premium. And years later, the formula reached cult status with the Volkswagen Golf R32. All-wheel drive traction, broader shoulders, a deeper exhaust note that would become iconic among enthusiasts. The R32 transformed the vr6 from clever engineering solution into legend. By that point, the narrative had completely flipped. What began as an internal risk was now the heart of Volkswagen's performance credibility. The critics who once whispered about overheating and vibration now listened to an exhaust note that echoed through tunnels and city streets across Europe and beyond. The vr6 was no longer a compromise, it was character. It was identity. It was proof that constraint, when handled with courage, can become advantage. And in that moment, the impossible engine had done something far bigger than fit into a tight engine bay. It had changed how the world saw Volkswagen. At first, the vr6 was a clever solution, a packaging victory, a way to squeeze 6 cylinders where no 6-cylinder was supposed to live. Then it became something else entirely. Because once Volkswagen realized what they had created, they did not stop at 6 cylinders. They understood that the true innovation was not the displacement, it was the architecture. That narrow 15-degree layout was more than a workaround. It was a new way of thinking about multi-cylinder design. The narrow angle was not a compromise anymore. It was a platform. It opened a door that no one else had even considered. If you could compress 6 cylinders into such a tight package, what would happen if you combined 2 of them? What if the narrow angle itself became a building block? That single question changed the trajectory of Volkswagen engineering. The vr6 evolved. It became more refined. It grew stronger. It proved it could handle forced induction. In applications like the Volkswagen Golf R32, its character matured into something unmistakable. The R32 transformed the vr6 from clever engineering solution into emotional icon. The exhaust note became iconic. Deep at idle, metallic under load, layered in a way that no conventional V6 could quite replicate, an unmistakable growl that enthusiasts still chase decades later. It was not just fast, it was emotional. It delivered torque in a wave rather than a spike. It felt mechanical, alive, deliberate. It gave Volkswagen performance credibility with personality. But the real turning point was not just what customers heard, it was what engineers were building behind the scenes. Engineers began experimenting with merging two narrow-angle VR banks onto a shared crankshaft. The result was radical, provocative, almost audacious. The vr6 became the conceptual foundation for the W8. Two compact VR banks joined together, creating 8 cylinders in a footprint that defied traditional V8 logic. Then came the W12, smoother, more powerful, compact enough to fit where a conventional 12-cylinder simply could not. The narrow-angle philosophy scaled upward without losing its core logic. Suddenly, Volkswagen had developed a modular performance architecture that no other manufacturer possessed. And then came the ultimate expression, the W16. 4 narrow-angle banks arranged into a compact block capable of handling absurd power levels and unimaginable thermal loads. Without the vr6, that architectural leap never happens. Without that original 15-degree gamble, there is no logical path to the engine that powered the Bugatti Veyron. That is the real twist of this entire story. The engine, once dismissed as a risky compromise, quietly laid the foundation for a hypercar that redefined performance limits for an entire generation. The vr6 was not just a solution to a packaging problem, it was the beginning of Volkswagen's most ambitious engineering era. By the time the vr6 had proven itself on the road, its impact was already spreading far beyond the cars that first carried it. What began as a packaging solution had become an engineering philosophy. The narrow 15-degree layout was not just clever, it was scalable, it was modular, it was expandable. And that changed everything inside the Volkswagen Group. The vr6 gave birth to something bigger than itself. From it came the W8, a compact 8-cylinder that fit where a traditional V8 would have struggled. Then the W12, smoother, more powerful, refined enough to power luxury sedans and grand tours across multiple brands. Each of those engines carried the DNA of that original narrow-angle gamble. And at the very top of the pyramid stood the W16. 4 narrow-angle banks combined into one mechanical monument, the heart of the Bugatti Veyron, an engine capable of reshaping the limits of speed and engineering ambition. Without the vr6, that architecture does not exist. Without that early decision to bend the rules, there is no logical pathway to stacking cylinders into such compact formations. The vr6 was not just an engine in a hot hatch, it was the structural blueprint for an entire generation of Volkswagen Group performance powertrains. But the legacy is not only technical, it is cultural. The vr6 gave Volkswagen character. It gave enthusiasts a sound they could recognize in the dark. It proved that constraint does not kill innovation. It proved that compromise, when executed with courage, can become revolution. An engine born from limitation reshaped the engineering DNA of one of the largest automotive groups in the world. And that is the part most people miss. The vr6 did not just save a product line, it changed the trajectory of Volkswagen engineering forever. So what did we really learn? The vr6 was never supposed to exist. It was born from limitation, from constraint, from a problem that looked unsolvable, and yet it became the engine that reshaped Volkswagen's engineering future. From the Golf to the R32, from the W8 to the W12, all the way to the W16, an engine born from compromise that rewrote the rules of packaging and performance. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you're subscribed to Das Auto Diaries. We break down the hidden engineering stories behind the cars you think you already know. And if you want to keep exploring the machines that change the industry, check out the next video on our channel. Because sometimes the most important revolutions start where no one is looking. See you in the next one.